Hello, welcome to Willow Hill and everyone joining us for worship today. We are so excited to worship with you on this third Sunday of Lent and third week in our sermon series, Reckless Love. Jesus is called to love our neighbor. This week, Pastor Nicole and Miss Gina continue their pilgrimage, so we have guest speaker Pastor Ken Hogren to deliver the message, Lavish Love. If you are new to Willow Hill, welcome. We're so glad you're here, and we would love a chance to get to know you. So please consider filling out the digital connection card linked in the video's description or comment new below the video. If you'd like to get to know Willow Hill a little bit more, you can check out our website, willowhill.org, or you can find us on social media through Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We'll go ahead and link our website as well as our social media handles in the video's description. Throughout the course of the worship service, please feel free to like, comment, and let us know what you're thinking. We would love to hear from you. And if there's any way that we could be praying for you, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. You can actually submit all of your prayers and praises through the digital connection card as well, and that way the staff can pray alongside you. Now, please join in singing today's opening song.
Well, hey, Willow Hill. As we enter into our time of prayer, let's take a few moments to connect our hearts to God, to lift up those thoughts that we have, those prayers that are on our hearts. I'll then pray a prayer for us, and at the end we can join together in the Lord's Prayer. Let us pray. O good and gracious God. We want to thank you for today and the blessings that you have given to us. Thank you for your faithfulness to us through dark days and through happy days. Whatever we are walking through, your faithfulness continues to be a constant in our lives. We ask that you would forgive us, God, for all of our shortcomings. We have not obeyed you fully, and we have strayed from the path that you have set out for us. We ask now that you would help us to get back on your path. We ask that we would leave our own desires behind and instead seek out your will for our lives. We pray, God, that you would help us to be your hands and feet. We ask that you would inspire us to reach out to those who are in need. Help us to love each other with the love that Christ has shown to us. And help us to boldly share about your love with those who need to hear it. We ask all of these things in the name of your Son, Jesus, who lived out love in front of our very eyes and who taught us to pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. Amen.
Hi, kids. It's time for small talk. I'm Miss Lee, and I get to share the message with you today since Miss Gina's not here. Later on in the service, Pastor Ken will be sharing a message about lavish love. Lavish means giving or involving large amounts. So we can think of it like a big love that we can give freely. So today, I want to think about us sharing a big love like Jesus, but I also want us to think about labels and how we might label people, their names or titles that we might give them. So I know we all have given names that were given to us by our parents or guardians, but do any of you have a nickname? Oh, I bet some of you have more than one nickname. So my given name is Lee. But some people know me as the director of hospitality. And I'm also a wife. And my husband calls me Ladybug. I'm a parent. And my kids call me Mom, Mama, or Mommy. I'm a daughter. And my mom calls me Sweet Pea, or Bee, or Dolly. I'm a sister. And my siblings call me Lita, or Lita Gee. Other members of my family just call me Leanne, or Leannie. And other people still might just know me as a veteran, a Latina, or woman. I ran out of room. So, as you can see, I have lots of names and titles that I go by. But when we think of these names and titles, some of these labels might help people relate to me better and feel a connection with me. And then others won't really create that same connection, and people won't relate to them at all. But does any one name or label have more value than the others? Is it more important or better? No. Does any label or name or nickname or title make you more or less deserving of love? No way! No way! We are all deserving of that big love that Jesus shared, and we all have the capacity to share lavish love like Jesus because of a title that we all share. Do you know what that title is? Yep, that's it. We are all children of God, and through Him, we are all able to share lavish love. It may come easier to some than others. But sharing big love, lavish love, is a choice we can make every day. And like following along with our Be Love calendar, many small acts can add up to a whole lot of love shared. The more we love others, the more love changes our lives, the way we act, the way we speak, the words we use. And when you meet someone new, you can build that connection, that relationship with them as a child of God. And also another important label, friend. All right, friends, let's fold our hands together and say our sentence prayer. Dear God, thank you for showing us a big love. Please help us to share that love with everyone, no matter what. Amen.
During this season of Lent, we have been focused on the love of Jesus, how he lived out such lavish love in the way that he lived his life. And I think we could all think about a time in our life where we have felt the love of God in a real, intangible way. Sometimes God uses others in our lives to help us experience his love more fully. And here at Willow Hill, that is what we seek to do every day, to share the tangible love of God with others. And the only way that we're able to do that is through you and through your generosity. And so we want to thank you for all the ways that you support Willow Hill and its ministries, and the ways then that we are able to share God's love with our community and with our world. Thank you for your gifts. It is making a difference. Well, I am still traveling abroad, and today we have another wonderful special guest. And if you've been around Willow Hill for a while, you will know this man well. Pastor Ken Hogren is going to be sharing with us today. I know that you will be blessed by his message as we continue on in our sermon series, Reckless Love. Enjoy.
Today is the third Sunday in a sermon series examining the call that Jesus offers to us to practice reckless love. We practice reckless love when we seek to love God with all of our heart, our soul, our mind, our strength, and when we also seek to love others as we love ourselves. We are using a book by Tom Berlin called Reckless Love as a resource for our series. And in the chapter called Lavish Love, we are reminded that if we're going to practice lavish love, a love that's offered freely and generously, a love offered unconditionally, that we're going to need to be consistent in our effort to see others as Jesus would see them. Now, Jesus had this incredible ability to see the face of God in every person that he met. And Jesus is encouraging us to try and do the same, that we see God's face in every person we encounter. Now, one of the challenges of lavishing this kind of love on others is that we're tempted to believe that as long as we love a few people, that we're fulfilling the call of Jesus. But in the Sermon on the Plain recorded in Luke's Gospel, Jesus tells his disciples, if you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? For even sinners love those who love them. The lavish love that Jesus teaches sounds like this. Love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, and pray for those who abuse you. Now, I don't know about you, but I find these words of Jesus to be very demanding, especially in a world that seems to be filled with so much chaos and conflict and division. But if you read about the time in which Jesus walked the earth, you'll find that it has some similarities to our time. So would it surprise you if I suggested that there were times when Jesus had some difficulties as he tried to share his lavish love with those around him? To help us understand what I'm talking about here, let's take a look at a story that's recorded in the 4th chapter of the Gospel of John. Now, John sets the story up by telling us that Jesus and his disciples have left Judea in a hurry. The Pharisees had noticed that as Jesus was teaching and preaching and healing, that many people were beginning to listen to him and were beginning to follow him. And so there were some Jewish leaders who decided that it was time to move against Jesus to try and make him less popular with the population. So Jesus and his disciples had left Judea to go back to Galilee, where they thought it would be safer for them. Now, John suggests that because of their hurry, that they hadn't brought provisions with them as they left Judea. And in fact, he said that they were in such a hurry to get back to Galilee that rather than taking the normal route through Peoria, that they had made the decision to take the shortest and quickest route through an area called Samaria. Now, they'd been walking most of the night, and in fact, they walked through the morning, and it was nearing noon as they approached a village that had a well at its outskirts. They were thirsty, and they were hungry, and they were tired, and they'd stopped just outside the Samaritan village near a well that was called Jacob's well. John tells us that Jesus, tired out by his journey, was sitting there at the well. As Jesus sat there, a woman from the Samaritan village approached the well to draw water. Now, the last thing she probably expected to find was a Jewish man sitting next to it. John tells us that the time of day was around noon. It was approaching the hottest part of the day. Usually no one came to the well at this hour. In fact, that's led some scholars to speculate that this woman may have been someone who was ostracized by many of the villagers so that she would come to the well at a time of day when she would expect no one to be there. But whatever the reason, as she approached the well, there was Jesus. And that was going to be a problem. Now, as we read the gospel narratives, it becomes apparent that the disciples, like other Jews of their day, knew that there were 4 groups of people that traditional Jews would have refused to accept as their equals. If you were called a Roman, or if you were called a Gentile, or if you were called a Samaritan, or to an Orthodox traditional Jew, if you were a woman, there could be a problem. Being called any one of these names immediately defined how you were going to be treated. Take the Romans. They were to be hated because they were citizens of the empire that had conquered Judah. In fact, for example, it was against Jewish law for a Jew to enter the home of a Roman. Gentiles were considered to be religiously unclean. If you touched a Gentile, you were supposed to go through a cleansing ritual before you were allowed to worship in the synagogue. Or a Jewish rabbi. A Jewish rabbi was not supposed to talk in public to a woman. He shouldn't talk to his wife, his daughter, not even his mother in public. But more than the Romans or the Gentiles or the way a woman might be considered, Samaritans were considered to be the worst of all. Remember the story of the Good Samaritan? It was considered outrageous because the Samaritan actually did something good for a Jew. And nothing good ever came out of Samaria. The Samaritans worshiped in the wrong places, they worshiped at the wrong times, they worshiped in the wrong ways. Oh no. Jews never wanted to be around Samaritans. These were 4 groups of people known by every Jew and how they were to be treated: Roman, Gentile, woman, Samaritan. On coming to the well, at the same time as Jesus and his disciples had gathered there, was a Samaritan woman, a person with 2 strikes for every Jew. Now, a confrontation seemed imminent unless Jesus acted fast. He had taught his disciples at the very beginning of his ministry that God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish but have eternal life. And the key word in that verse is whoever. It doesn't matter if you're Jew or Roman, Gentile or woman, or even Samaritan. But as we read the Gospels, we know that the disciples seem to struggle with this teaching. Jesus was weary from the journey. He wanted to sit down and rest, not spend the afternoon disputing with his disciples about the merits of a Samaritan woman. And even more important, this was a moment in which he could share his lavish love of God with someone else. He wasn't going to let the disciples prevent him from engaging this person in a conversation. It didn't matter if the disciples might be caught up in their cultural warfare or their prejudice or they wanted to start a political dispute and conversation with this woman. Jesus was going to be reckless with his love. So what does Jesus do? He sent his disciples, all of them, to go shopping. In short, what he really did was he got the disciples out of the way by sending them on an errand. Now just a little sidebar here. It always makes me smile when I read this particular story and get to this part, when I think about Jesus not sending one or two or three of his disciples to get provisions for them. He sends all 12 of them away. And can you see those 12 guys in the grocery store having a conversation about which cluster of grapes looks the perfection of ripe, or trying to decide which bowl of figs or olives might be the best value? Have you ever been around 12 guys trying to shop at the same time? Oh well. Jesus sends them off, gets them out of the way. Now, as the Samaritan woman approached the well, Jesus was sitting there by himself. I can't help but think that she must have been surprised when Jesus spoke to her. He doesn't say much initially. He simply says to her as she comes to the well, "Give me a drink." Jesus was letting her know that he was ready to engage her in a conversation as a way of beginning to share the lavish love of God. But John tells us, as he writes this story in his gospel, that the woman didn't want to talk to Jesus. She responds to Jesus by pointing out two things that should trigger his response to her, that would define how he was to treat her. She points out that he is a Jew and she is a Samaritan. And as if that isn't enough of a trigger, she also points out, as if he didn't know it, that she's a woman. She says to Jesus in response to his request, "How is it that you, a Jew, ask a drink of me, a woman of Samaria?" In her own way, she was telling Jesus to be quiet. Stop talking to me. Leave me alone. Now, I guess in my imagination, as I think about Jesus encountering people along the way, I always think that people would welcome a conversation with Jesus. But this woman wants him to leave her alone. She points out the barriers that stand between them in a way that should avoid a conversation. Now, I think that happens a lot. And if it happened to Jesus, my guess is we ought to expect it to happen to us. Even when we seek to share the lavish love of God, it doesn't mean everybody wants to listen to us or to hear us or to be in conversation with us. But Jesus, he didn't allow the words of the woman to trigger the response that she anticipated. Instead of allowing the word Samaritan to define how he was going to treat her, he treated her like a Samaritan person. Instead of treating her the way that many Jews treated a woman, Jesus treated her like a female person. Jesus looked at her, and who he saw was a child of God, someone bearing the very image of God in her face, in her eyes. So Jesus offered her lavish love by engaging himself with her at a personal level. John tells us he even offers her living water that becomes a spring of water gushing up in her to eternal life. Now, as John writes the story, as their conversation comes to an end, the disciples return from the village. It seems they were surprised to find him talking with a woman, a Samaritan woman. Now, John doesn't record that he says anything that the disciples say anything, but I have this feeling that they were speaking with their eyes. We can do that, can't we? Our eyes and our face. Because soon after they got there, she left her water jar at the well, and she went back to the village. But John doesn't stop the story there. He says that she didn't stay away. John says that she went to the people in the city and she began to say to them, "Come and see a man who told me all that I ever did. Can this be the Messiah?" You see, John wants us to know that she had experienced the loving acceptance of God. She knew that she was in the presence of the Messiah, someone expressing that gracious, unconditional love of God. And then John wants us to know that because of her testimony, because of the way she began to share that lavish love with others, many Samaritans from that village came to believe. John tells us this story because he wants us to know what can happen when we stop allowing words to define people and also, I think, ourselves, and that we seek to accept others as children of God. John wants us to know that we can change their lives and we can change our own lives as we engage ourselves with people recognizing in them the image of God. The Jews in the ancient world knew at least 4 defining words. They used them a lot: Roman, Gentile, Samaritan, woman. Using words to define people didn't stop in ancient Palestine. We find ourselves using words like that today. Can you think of some of the words that we use to define people? That we can use to create barriers between them and us? That people might use to try and convince us that we ought not to engage ourselves in sharing lavish love with others? Now, I realize it's very difficult to change our habits. You know, Jesus struggled with his own disciples as he tried to help them overcome their prejudice and fear and bigotry of others. He knew it would take time for them to change. I guess we shouldn't think that we're any different from the disciples. And I think of all the unexpected conversations that might become available to us if only we constantly and consistently seek to see in others the image of God. And we always take the time to share that lavish love that God has shared with us so that we can be changed and they can be changed as we seek to be God's children. And that's the word I offer you today. In the name of the Creator and the Christ and the Holy Spirit. Amen. And now, as our service comes to a close, I leave these words of benediction with you. May you seek to serve God with patience and yet always with passion. May you be deliberate and also intentional in enacting your faith. May you be steadfast in celebrating not only the Spirit's presence, but also the Spirit's power in your life. And may peace, may God's peace always be your way in the world. Amen.
Thank you for worshiping with us. We are accepting donations of small individually wrapped candy to help us fill the eggs for our eggings and Easter extravaganza. This is a wonderful and sweet way that we can help share God's love with our community. The Witness team is ready to egg some houses and raise funds for youth missions and retreats. If you want one of our bunnies to hide filled Easter eggs in your yard or someone else's yard, email Lee Hager and please send a donation to Willow Hill via cash or check made out to Willow Hill with egging in the memo line. The eggings will occur every weekend through April 10th, and we will only be able to egg local addresses. If you are looking for an opportunity to serve, consider joining the United Methodist Women on March 24th from 12:30 to 4 p.m. at Midwest Mission Distribution Center. The cost is $6 per person to cover the cost of supplies for the center. Please contact the church office if you want to sign up. For prayer concerns or pastoral care needs, please contact the church office. Contact information can be found on our website. If you enjoyed today's worship service, please consider liking the videos and subscribing to our YouTube channel to stay up to date on our latest videos. Thank you and have a blessed day.